is episode 123, Quit Trying to Be Creative. I am Kathleen Wiley, a Jungian psychoanalyst in North Carolina, and I am here with Deborah Henson-Conant, a composer, a Grammy-nominated composer, I might add, a mentor or coach, a creative. We both play the harp, and that's why we call this Jung at Harp. So every week, or almost every week, DHC and I get together and we come up with a question that we want to explore. And so we don't start with a script or answers, but we start with a question. And we invite you into our exploration so you can add chats in and we can see those as we're live. And we would love to have your input on this. So part of this topic came about as I was listening to Deborah, your video with the Blues Harp Challenge. And one of the things that you said in there is you said, quit trying to be creative because you are creative. And that sparked all kinds of things for me. So what do you want to say about that?
Well, one of the things I want to say is when we were preparing for this, and I always wish I could record the times when we were preparing for it, you just started talking about this and it was great. And you said, our efforting tightens us and we block what wants to flow out. But when we shift from ego consciousness to an ego that lives on the threshold of listening to the unconsciousness, of the unconscious, trusting that if I do these things, then something can emerge that's greater. Now, and that is what I was discovering. So this challenge is a challenge about playing the blues, and it includes a play along. So there's this structure and format that's already given to you in audio, and then I give patterns. And these patterns are literally people who don't play the harp. If you were able to set up the harp the way that I tell you to, or even if you use the white keys of the piano, they're patterns like. This is just 6 notes, but you can, as blues is going on, you can use these patterns. I mean, or you could just keep playing it. So on and so forth. So there's a bunch of patterns. There's that pattern, and then there's so there's like really just 4 patterns. And what I'm trying to do with in this training is to help people realize with the patterns and with the structure underneath supporting you, you don't have to try to be creative. You can actually listen to what's happening, get into your body, and let your naturalness out, and it's just a different kind of thing. And if you try to be creative, it actually gets in the way of what you're trying to do, and it's a different art form. But it ends up, it is the blues, and some players are like, well, it's the blues. I mean, it's a completely different art form, but it holds in it all these ways of engaging with music, like being able to listen while you're playing, being able to actually follow, your fingers, knowing, just understanding phrasing. There's just so much in it. But if you try to control it by listening and saying, oh, that was not a good line, or that, whatever, if you do that, you just completely get in the way of it.
Yes.
And so one of the things that I've learned in, creative experiments that we've been doing in Hip Harp Academy is that when we have a practice that is creative and we allow it to get to us, our creativity comes out. We are creative. We just are. You don't have to try to do that. And when you do try, that often squelches it. Now, I bet you have a lot to say about that, in terms of your embodiment techniques and Jungian. Yeah, take it away.
Yeah. Part of when I was listening to the video where you said that, it spurred all kinds of thoughts for me, because when people come to work with me for analysis or they join my embodiment circle, more often than not, they've tried all kinds of things. They've tried cognitive behavioral therapy, they've tried rational motive therapy, they've gone to this coach, they've seen a spiritual director. And by the time they get to analysis, they've tried these other things that somehow inadvertently have left the ego still thinking, if I just figure out the right thing, then something will change. And what the psychoanalytic tradition knows is that it isn't about figuring out the right thing with the ego, but it's about getting in relationship to the larger self that we are, to that creative life force that really is the core of our psyche. And that when we can listen to ourselves, and this is the mistake that most people make and we're trained to make from really infancy, is instead of looking within for the answers and listening and taking that as information to inform us about how to move in the world, we get trained to listen to what the outside world tells us. So we learn to listen to, parents, to teachers, to this person and that person. And then we grow up to be adults who listen to this coach or this spiritual teacher. We just blinked out and back in.
I know. You disappeared. You're now in the dark hole of utter blackness.
I'm still in blackness?
Yeah.
Or did I come back? Oh, I came back on my end.
Oh dear.
This is the unconscious giving us an object lesson. When we look to the outside world, we disappear into the black hole and we can't be seen. Because the blackness of all of these collective ideas of who we should be and how we should get to where our heart wants us to go just swallows us up.
Yeah, I mean, it's. Do you want to? I would love to speak to what you just said, and so I don't want you to leave, but I'm wondering if maybe you need to leave and come back.
Yeah, did that? I turned my camera off and turned it back on. Did that help?
No, it didn't make a difference.
So for everyone who's watching earlier this morning, my internet was completely down. So obviously there's still something going on.
So do you want to leave the room and then come back in?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, great. All right. Okay. So I'll say a little bit while Kathleen is gone, but then I'll want to say it when she comes back in. But of course I forgot what it is now. Oh yeah. What I was hearing her say was, when we're listening to others there is a listening to ourselves and a listening to the music and then there's also that sort of interim listening to what other people have to say. And Kathleen, I'm not seeing you. Still not seeing you.
Wow.
Shall we proceed in darkness, or do you want?
I guess so.
Or do you want to change your?
I can try changing my camera since you're dark.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, let's try
although I must admit, I do proceed in darkness a lot of the time.
This is kind of funny.
It is. So just for everybody who's joining us now, we're having a little bit of a technical problem, and Kathleen has disappeared into the black hole. So, so why don't I sort of speak while you're doing that, because what you said made me have a lot of thoughts, and you're still in blackness.
Great. Let's see.
Anyways, okay. There you are.
Here I am.
Okay,
great. Good.
Okay, good.
Okay, let me get the camera.
All right. So what I really loved about what you said is that we're talking about what we're listening to. And as you were speaking, I was thinking, well, that's really interesting. You are saying, I think I heard you say, psychoanalysts know this, that really what we're asking people to do is listen to the greater self. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting, because that's really what 12-step recovery is about. And as far what I know about religion, that's what religion is about. So that's interesting. That's, I like finding things where like, oh, that's just one thing I loved about music is thinking finding a form in classical music that was the same as in jazz and being like, oh, okay, so that's a fundamental. That's a fundamental, even though it's done differently in different ways. And so then when you started talking about listening, I realized that did I say I turned this off? I turned it off. Okay.
See, this is what happens when we try to listen to ourselves. Something from the outside intrudes.
Right. Um, so anyway,
Ah,
so the difference between listening, so when I set up, like let's say I set up, where, wait, so I set up, let's say that's going, and then someone's dropping, or no, let's say this, because this was exactly the snippet that I set up this week, in Hip Harp Academy. If I'm listening to what I just created some resonance, and I don't know if it's coming across, and then I drop notes, and I just let that resonance, I let it open me up. That's a different thing than thinking, what should I sing? But if I just listen first and drop what I'm singing like a drop of rain into what I'm hearing, it's something completely different. And that can happen whether I'm playing jazz or something else, and it's a different kind of whether I'm listening to a voice that's like, you should do this better, or this should be like this, or that this is the key that you're in. And so I'm constantly searching for structures that I can give to there's structures that I've discovered for myself, but that I can give to other musicians that will give them that freedom to be able to listen and then play into that. And as I'm saying that, I'm thinking, there's lessons that I learned about music as a child. I did not have official music lessons, but my mother was a musician and taught me certain things. And they were tiny little lessons that happened in, less than 10 minutes, sometimes less than a moment. And one of them was when she was teaching me how to harmonize in singing. And she said, she said, when I'm singing, you find a note that sounds okay. And if you don't like the sound of that note, shift it just by one, and just shift it a little bit, and then hold on to that note until it doesn't sound good anymore. And then shift to another note, shift just one, and just keep doing that. That is the way to learn to harmonize. And there were many ways in which we didn't get along, but this was really beautiful. There was no judgment on her part. There was no like, no, that's the wrong note or anything like that. It was really just, this is how you learn to do this. You listen and drop your thing into that. And then if it doesn't work, you shift it just slightly. Now, why am I saying that? Oh, because that lesson, that one little lesson, is a fundamental, and it grows and it grows and it grows and it grows. And you can use it over and over again in many parts of life. And everywhere you use it, it will allow your creativity to come through. So you don't have to try to be creative. You just have something that you're doing that takes you out of that critique voice so that it can come through.
Yeah, absolutely. You said two or three things that triggered for me how important it is that we listen non-judgmentally, and that we really trust that there is, to use the 12-step language, a power greater than ourselves. And one of the things that you also said in the, I can't remember if it was in one of the Blues Challenge videos, or it was last week actually in our Young at Heart. You I may not be saying it exactly the way you said it, but you said there are just certain principles that are inherent in music. And when I heard you make that statement, or however you made it, I thought, okay, so music is a thing in itself. The idea of the numinous, that there are the thing in itself. So there's this energy system of music that just is. And when we understand how that system works, the thirds, the fifths, the patterns, the harmony, then we have the toolbox to be able to trust what wants to emerge from that. In a way, that's the same thing of trusting that there is a you, there is a psyche soul that's Deborah,
Mm,
there's a psyche soul that's Kathleen or Laurie
mhm,
or the Facebook user
mhm,
who's with
mhm,
us that is a thing in itself.
mm,
And when we understand the principles of how we work, that some of them are universal principles, like all of us have a physical skeleton that's pretty much the same, but also very different. You only have to look at us
right.
to see that. Our psyche is the same thing. So if we understand the principles, and then we begin to see how that principle comes through us and shapes us. And this is why, right, the same people can play, different people can play the same piece of music and it's going to sound different
Mhm,
because they're coming through. It's how that
mm.
flows through them. So that trusting
Wow, oh
that,
my God, so much just like came floating through. As you were speaking about that, I was thinking, wow, it's like when we can get a fundamental structure of music, like the blues, or like something as simple as the snippets that I come, share. It, as you were saying, speaking it, I was like, wow, it's like it comes through and we collect on it so that it actually, we come out. And it's one of the things that I love about the Academy is that it's like watching this garden bloom. I'm just watching people bloom
mhm,
by using simple forms. And as you were saying, there are things that are fundamental to music, and I was thinking, right, and then I was thinking, okay, so there's things that are fundamental to Western music, like sixths and thirds and certain structures, and then I was thinking deeper, well, I wonder what's fundamental to, other music, and then I was wondering, well, what's fundamental to music just as a form? And
mhm.
one of my favorite musicals is The Music Man, and the reason that it's my favorite musical is because they talk about the fact that singing is just extended speaking, and then they use
Mhm,
that so that you can really see, um, it's for me, it really, gave a truth that that speaking and singing and speaking and art and communication, it's all comes from the same thing. Um, but then
mhm,
it made me think, even deeper, and then I was thinking like, well, okay, what's fundamental? Is there music in animals, or is there music in any, what is
mhm.
fundamental to music? And Stravinsky and Schoenberg and many many people thought about like what's the difference between a bird song, which is beautiful, but is it
Mm.
music? And what
Mm.
what makes it music? Now we're talking about something, we started off talking about
I love it.
right, we're talking about starting about quit trying
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
creative because you are creative. And
Yeah.
as you try, I've been really aware lately that many of the things that I think I'm doing to control or to try to um, make things better I'm really just controlling and shifting myself down and making myself less accessible to the world and making the world
Mhm.
less accessible to me. And I'm thinking from what you said in the very first statement that this is exactly when people come to you. I think with both of us, people come
Mhm.
to me as musicians and they're like, either I'm stuck, I got all this classical stuff in my head and now I can't get off the page, or I'm coming to this instrument as an adult for the first time, help me in, I don't want to go through this whole thing to get to the point of freedom, so how can I get to freedom more quickly? And I would assert that it is the same with people who come to you.
Oh, yeah. People are ready to be able to feel an inner and harmony, an inner and outer. They want a congruence between who they are and they feel inside and the outside world. And usually when people come to me, they feel things on the inside that aren't
Mm.
congruent with the outside or what they've learned. And then they've turned on themselves. And that's
Mm.
the problem. Or they've turned on other people instead of when you were getting into, okay, so there are fundamentals of Western music, there are fundamentals of African music, fundamentals of world music, that um, when we recognize that the fundamentals of who I am have commonality with the fundamentals of who you are at their most basic level, their most instinctive level. But those things are going to shape differently in each of us. And if I don't make room for that with you, then I'm not going to be respectful or engage you. We have to allow for the nuanced differences while recognizing the commonalities.
I want to pull this up. I want to pull this comment
Yeah.
up. Oops, not so effective at doing that. Oh, here we go. So we recognize the musical structures and fundamentals that help us trust and express from them. More challenging to recognize the personal structures to help us trust.
Yeah.
And this is something I've been thinking about lately, because ever since I discovered in the Golden Cage in my musical, I discovered that the fundamental thing that creates transformation for both of the characters is trust. In the middle of the show, there's this moment when the two characters turn to each other, all the music falls away, they're authentic and real with each other in a way they never have been at all. I mean, it gives me chills to think about it. And it was very intuitive for me to write that, almost like a dream. And then everything that happens after that, one character becomes incredibly conniving. The other one becomes incredibly, scared, and they do things that endanger each other, and they get, but they're galloping towards transformation. And they're galloping towards transformation together. And I started thinking, and I realized what made that happen was this moment of trust, that if any moment we experience trust, everything changes. It's like a state change within us, and we will gallop. I have it that we gallop towards transformation, and it may look weird and but then I started thinking, okay, well, how am I going to find that moment of trust for myself? And just what Lori's saying, how more challenging to recognize the personal structures to help us trust. So, Kathleen, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, well, I do have some things to say about that. If we go to the developmental psychologist Erickson, he says that trust versus mistrust is the first psychosocial developmental stage, that it gets set in place in our psyche from birth to 2 years old. So trust is a very body-based state. It's not an intellectual choice. It's a body-based state. And how do we facilitate a sense of trust in ourselves is we give ourselves the very things that we needed when we were a baby. Mm-hmm. And what do we need when we're an infant child? We need to be held. Mm-hmm. We need someone to tend our needs. We need someone to tend our needs when we've gone to the bathroom, to clean us up, to, when we're hungry, that we get fed, that, when we need soothing because we feel alone in the world, that we're rocked and cooed. We need to be engaged with. So there has to be a relationship where we tend our most fundamental needs. Now, this isn't glamorous, and this probably isn't the answer that most highly creative people want. But when it comes to how do we begin to have this sense of trust in ourselves and trust in the world, it comes to having a relationship where we tend the most basic, infantile of our own needs. And there's something that happens when we do that actually is very freeing of expecting other people to take care of our inner baby. One of my analysts used to say, we're all far more baby than we want to admit.
Right. Big babies.
And technology hasn't helped. I text or email and I expect an instantaneous response. How infantile is that? It's not like somebody's sitting around waiting to tend to me. But nonetheless, so I think we also have to then get over judging ourselves for this.
It's funny because I remember I wrote a blog post once called "I'm Just a Big Baby."
Yeah.
But yeah. I want to go back to what you said about, and I want to pull this because I know we have to end in like 5 minutes, being rocked and cooed.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I'm wondering, what is it about these snippets and the blues, which is just basically a large snippet? What is it that actually seems to provide the trust? And 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 Deb's asking, and we need to feel safe. Exactly.
Yes.
And that's when our creativity comes out, when we feel safe. And I'm noticing that these little tiny forms, like this one, I can feel safe. I kind of know where it is. I learn the shape. I know that I can play any note with it. I know that I can move it the same shape to somewhere else. My hands are playing the same dance. I can even keep singing the same note or change it slightly, so I can start in a place I know and move out from that, and I can come back to where I started and start again. And maybe I can start to add rhythm and do the same thing with rhythm, and still coming back to where I started every time I need that cooing and that rocking. And I'm just realizing that the power of these musical structures to give us that sense of trust, as you said, that physical sense of trust, so that we can quit trying to be creative, trying to be the one who is the one who is the one who is the one, and actually just sit there and let that. I can't believe I'm saying these things.
Yeah, but I think it's so true. And when do we feel safe? We feel safe when our needs are met. You know, when our needs are respected, when there isn't a dismissal or a disavowal. And I love what you're saying about that, the snippet and the rhythm that emerges from that organically. You then added it in, but it was already there. Really is like the cooing and rocking. It's holding ourselves. And so I imagine that as I'm here with ego, we showed up, we were ready for Jung at Harp, and technology did its thing. It's like the unconscious was there, but we were able to dance with it. That's how I sometimes call it. We were able, instead of being oppressed and caving, we were like, oh, look at this. What's this telling us? How does this fit with what's happening and what we're exploring in the moment? And I love what your mother said about to learn harmony. Pick a note, and then if you don't like the way it sounds, go up one. I mean, what beautiful permission. So if we can realize that our body sensations, our emotions, those moods and affects that get going, and all of those random images and spontaneous thoughts that come into our head are actually like musical notes within the whole scale or range of our psyche. And we can just begin to listen then to how they sound together. And we can begin to develop the psychic muscle to pair them differently, just like we do with our voice when we're finding the right harmony, or we do on the harp with our hands, or whatever your instrument is, or your art form, or your work. So, but if we disavow, if I'm always playing songs in minor keys, which I just love. Oh, they energize me. And John, is like, can't you flip some levers and make that sound happy? I'm like, oh, but it's so beautiful. It's so soulful. What's resonating for me in the moment and just energizing me is pulling him down. And so it's just like making room for that and listening non-judgmentally. I feel like I went off on a tangent.
Oh,
But
maybe, but one of the things that I love, and I wish we had another hour to talk about this, what I'm hearing when you said the spectrum of all the thoughts and who we are, and then I thought, oh, like the harp, there's all the notes of the harp, but there's different modes, and we can choose to have those notes mean different things. We can have a different fundamental, and when we have a different fundamental, it gives each of the notes a different place to be, and that's a different discussion. I mean, that's a discussion about modes, and I know we have to end 1 minute ago, but that.
But I want to say maybe we
Yeah.
can pick up on this as a
Yeah.
topic next week or in one of the weeks coming. Is so then part of what, just like on the harp or whatever your instrument is or your art form, you have to learn how to shift modes and what mode works for what. We have to do that same kind of learning, muscle building with our own psyche, with our body sensations, our emotions, our images, and our thoughts. And most of us don't learn how to do that in a way that allows us to be who we are instead of efforting.
Yeah, and thank you. And you made me think of something this morning. I was out for a run and I was kind of like, "Ugh, my legs are hurting this morning." And a friend had written to me and she said, I go to the gym, and she said, I have to go around, going around this 10 times is a mile. And she's partially blind. And so, it's not like she can go out and run the streets of New York.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, and so she said, it could be boring. She said, but I settle in. And as I thought
Mm-hmm.
that, I was like, I love that. That's I can find, whether it's a snippet on the harp or whether it's a rhythm or whether it's washing the dishes or whether it's running, I can settle in and let the creativity out. Let's see what happens. I want to see what happens to let that out. And so that's what I'm going to take away from this is not how
Mm-hmm.
can I just be aware of the snippets in my life. And instead of trying to make something different, can I repeat that thing? Can I repeat that thing? What does it open up for me when I repeat that thing? And how does it move just slightly differently? And what creativity then comes out, and what trust can I feel in being like, oh, I know how to do this thing and I'm doing it
Mm-hmm.
again.
Mm-hmm. I love that settling in. What a beautiful
Yeah.
mantra for the week, and definitely with compassion and
And
curiosity.
yes, thank
Always, always.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes. So thank you so much for the beautiful comments that we've gotten today. It really feels like you're part of this conversation, and that's beautiful. Kathleen, I wish we could go on for 5 hours right now, but it's time for others. And thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. And thank you to everybody who's here, everybody who's in the Blues Harp Jam Challenge right now, and everybody who's in my life who's showing me that the beauty of creativity coming out through patterns, through structure, and through, the freedom that we get from that. Kathleen, thank you.
Okay.
Farewell. Go forth and harp on you being creative and who